cop points a gun at the wrong man during a tense roadside stop, but has no idea who he's threatening. What unfolds next will flip the script on power, prejudice, and pride. Let us know in the comments section below, where are you watching from today? The flashing blue and red lights cut through the stillness of the road like a blade. Ryan Maddox blinked twice, the glow catching in his rearview mirror. He wasn't speeding. He hadn't rolled through the stop sign. He hadn't even changed lanes without a signal. He knew the rules. He always followed them. Especially in places like this. Small-town Tennessee, where the streets were too quiet, the looks lingered too long, and the flags on front porches weren't always welcoming. He slowed and pulled to the side of the road, both hands resting on the wheel. 10 and 2. That's what Samuel had drilled into him. Keep your hands visible, don't talk back, don't argue, even if you're right. Ryan hated that they even had to talk like that, but being married to a black man in America meant learning the rules of survival early. And being gay, that was just another layer. Ryan had come out in college, no big dramatic reveal, no screaming match. His parents, devout Southern Baptists from outside Savannah, Georgia, had cried for different reasons, not out of anger, but fear. They were terrified he'd get hurt just for being himself. They were right to be scared. The cop car idled behind him for a long beat. Then the door opened. Boots crunched gravel. A flashlight flicked on. Ryan's heart thudded loud in his chest. He reached for the glove compartment but stopped short. No sudden moves. He rolled the window down and waited. The officer appeared. A tall, square-jawed man with a buzz cut and mirrored sunglasses, even though the sun had already dipped behind the trees. His badge gleamed and his hand rested casually near his holstered gun. "Even in," the officer said. No smile, no warmth, just suspicion. "License and registration." Ryan nodded, slow, deliberate. "Sure. I'm going to reach for it, okay? It's in the glove compartment." The cop didn't move, just watched. "Go ahead." Ryan retrieved the documents, keeping every motion exaggerated and slow. When he handed them over, the cop's eyes flicked over the name. "Ryan Maddox," he read aloud. "What brings you to Brentford, Mr. Maddox?" Ryan offered a polite smile. "Just visiting family nearby. I'm heading to the store and then back to the cabin." "You from around here?" "No, sir. Just in town for a few days." The officer squinted at him. "This your vehicle?" "It's a rental." "You got a husband, Mr. Maddox?" Ryan's stomach dropped. The question wasn't casual. Not here. Not now. "Yes," he said, steady as he could. "I do." A pause. The officer's jaw tightened. "What's his name?" "Samuel." "Samuel Maddox." Something flickered across the cop's face. Recognition? Disgust? Ryan couldn't tell. The flashlight beam drifted inside the car, sweeping across the empty passenger seat, then to Ryan's wrist where his wedding band gleamed in the light. "Where you staying?" "A cabin just north of town. It's an Airbnb." The cop's posture shifted. His hand didn't move to his gun, but it twitched. "You sure you're not lost?" Ryan stiffened. "No, sir. I have the address. I can show you the reservation if you want." The officer didn't answer. Instead, he walked back to the squad car with Ryan's ID. Ryan's chest stayed tight. His fingers gripped the wheel again. He shouldn't have to be scared. He hadn't done anything wrong. But fear had a way of sneaking in, even when you knew you were right. Especially when you were gay. Especially when you were married to someone powerful, someone visible. Samuel had warned him not to go into town alone. He said, "Baby, I don't want you getting caught up in somebody's bigotry. You know how this place is." Ryan thought he was being careful. He hadn't expected this. The cop was taking too long. Ryan glanced back in the mirror, just as the officer was returning. This time the flashlight beam was off. The man's expression had changed. His lips were tight, eyes hard. He reached the driver's side, leaned in close. "You got ID for your husband?" Ryan blinked. "Why would I carry that?" The officer didn't like the answer. "Step out of the vehicle." Ryan froze. "I'm sorry?" "Step out of the vehicle." The voice had changed. No longer polite, no longer calm. Ryan's pulse spiked. "Officer, I haven't done anything wrong." "No." Ryan unbuckled slowly. He opened the door, stepped out, hands raised slightly. He barely had time to stand before he saw it. The officer's hand dropping to his holster, the cold gleam of the gun being drawn. "You make any move I don't like," the officer said, low and menacing, "and I'll drop you right here. You hear me?" Ryan's voice trembled. "I'm unarmed. I'm just trying to comply." The officer advanced a step. "Why, you nervous, huh? Got something to hide?" "I'm nervous because you just drew a gun on me," Ryan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm not a threat." "You people always say that," the cop spat, "acting like you're innocent, acting like the law don't apply to you." "You people?" Ryan echoed. The gun didn't move. The officer's lip curled. "You know what I mean." And suddenly Ryan understood. It wasn't about a traffic violation. It wasn't about suspicion. It was about hate. His heart hammered. His skin buzzed with adrenaline. And then, a voice from behind the patrol car. "Put your weapon down, Officer Slater." A woman's voice, firm, commanding. The cops startled. A second cruiser had pulled up. Unseen, silent. From the shadows, a tall black woman in uniform emerged, her badge gleaming under the moonlight. "Sergeant Monica Reed," she said. "Lower your weapon. Now." Slater hesitated. But something in her tone, in her stance, made him obey. The gun lowered. Ryan staggered back a step, breath coming in short bursts. Reed turned to him. "Mr. Maddox," she said, her voice calm. "Are you all right?" He nodded shakily. She stepped forward, took his arm gently, and added quietly, "I know who you are. We're calling your husband now." Ryan looked at her, the weight of it all crashing into him. Finally, he let himself exhale. Ryan sat on the curb, his palms still trembling as he rubbed them against his jeans. The concrete beneath him was warm from the day's sun, but his skin had gone cold. Sergeant Monica Reed stood a few feet away, speaking in low, clipped tones into her radio. Though her words were quiet, her stance was steel, like a lighthouse braced against the storm. Officer Slater had retreated to his cruiser, clearly rattled, yet still defiant. His jaw clenched, arms crossed tightly over his chest like he couldn't quite decide if he was furious, ashamed, or scared. Maybe all three. Ryan couldn't bring himself to look at him. His ears still rang from the sound of his voice, that twisted venom behind "you people." Not just about his sexuality, that was part of it, sure, but the way Slater had said it. It was all rolled into one bitter sentence: the interracial marriage, the pride flag on his rental car keychain, the softness in Ryan's voice, the vulnerability he couldn't hide even if he tried. And he never tried. Ryan was openly gay, not loud, not flamboyant, but unapologetically himself. He wore his wedding band proudly. He spoke about his husband like anyone else would, without hiding or hesitating, because that was the kind of love he and Samuel had built. Public, powerful, and sacred. He wasn't going to shrink for anyone. But tonight, he felt smaller than he had in years. Monica walked back toward him, her boots crunching gently on the gravel. She crouched beside him, keeping her tone low and even. "Dispatch contacted Director Maddox," she said. "He's on a secure line right now, and he's asking to speak with you directly." Ryan blinked, stunned. "They patched him in?" Monica offered a small smile. "You're not just any civilian, Mr. Maddox. He shook his head, accepting the phone she handed him. I never want to be treated differently. That's not what this is about. Of course, she said softly, but after what just happened, your husband has every right to be looped in. Ryan lifted the phone to his ear. Sam? The voice on the other end was calm, controlled, but beneath that familiar tone was a storm Ryan could feel through the speaker. Ryan, are you okay? Are you hurt? No, Ryan said, voice cracking with the truth of it. Not hurt, just shook. There was a pause, a heavy one. I'm coming down there, Samuel said. I don't care if I have to call the governor or land a chopper in the middle of Main Street. I'm not letting this slide. Sam, Ryan said quickly, you don't need to. I do. The voice on the other end left no room for argument. This wasn't just a stop. He drew a weapon on you. He tried to intimidate you for being gay, for being you. Ryan closed his eyes, swallowing the knot in his throat. I didn't do anything wrong. I know. And everyone's about to know that, too. When the call ended, Monica stood again, watching him carefully. She didn't hover. She gave him the space to stand on his own, which he appreciated. I'm placing Slater on administrative leave effective immediately, she said. We're going to run an internal review and hand over footage to the DA. And I'd like your full statement before the night's out, if you're up for it. Ryan nodded. Yes, of course. He glanced toward the squad car. Slater sat inside, now visibly tense, hands gripping the wheel like he was holding on to the last shred of control. Does he know who I am? Ryan asked. Monica's gaze didn't waver. Not yet, but he's about to. A black SUV turned the corner at that moment, sleek and unassuming, its government plates catching the glow of the streetlight for just a second. It stopped with precision at the edge of the scene, and before the engine even shut off, Samuel Maddox was out the door. He wasn't wearing a suit, just jeans and a dark-fitted shirt, but he didn't need the uniform to project authority. His presence commanded the air. His eyes locked onto Ryan, and the steel in his face melted into something softer. They embraced in the middle of the road, both gripping tighter than they meant to. Neither said anything at first. There were no words big enough to carry the weight of that kind of fear. Samuel finally pulled back just enough to study Ryan's face. Did he touch you? No, Ryan said, but he wanted to. You could see it in his eyes. Monica stepped forward and extended a hand. Director Maddox, I'm Sergeant Reed. I handled the response. Samuel shook her hand firmly. Thank you for protecting my husband when someone under your command chose to see him as a threat. I won't make excuses for him, Monica said. He crossed a line, and he's going to face the consequences. A few more cruisers had arrived, and a hushed crowd had started to gather behind the tape. Phone cameras were out, whispers traveled fast. The tension in the air was thick, like something huge was brewing, but no one yet knew just how high this would go. Inside the cruiser, Slater finally stepped out, barking, "What's the holdup? Am I free to go or not?" Samuel turned, slow and measured. "You're not free, not yet, and not from what's coming." Slater scoffed. "I followed protocol." "You pointed a loaded weapon at the husband of the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation," Samuel said, voice sharp. "Tell me what part of that was protocol." Slater froze, visibly paling. "You didn't know," Monica said coolly. "You didn't check before drawing your weapon? You assumed." Slater opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Ryan crossed his arms. "You saw a man with a soft voice and a wedding ring and decided I wasn't worth your respect. You didn't know who I was, but I was still a human being." The crowd had gone quiet. Even the wind felt like it had stopped to listen. Samuel stepped forward, just close enough. "My husband is a gay man who has spent his entire adult life being targeted, judged, and underestimated. And tonight, you reminded him that a badge doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes it means danger." Slater looked down, no words left to defend himself. And in that silence, something powerful shifted. Ryan didn't feel powerless anymore. He felt seen, he felt heard. And for the first time since those lights flashed behind him, he remembered exactly who he was. The following morning, Brentford's police department sat like a silent monolith beneath the gray Tennessee sky. Inside its walls, conversations were hushed, eyes darted, and tension bloomed in the corners of every office. Everyone had heard. The whispers were everywhere, leaking like water through cracked stone. A local cop had drawn his weapon on the FBI director's husband, a gay man, a white civilian, a man with a name that carried federal weight. But even more threatening than the title was how it happened. The words hate crime had already been mentioned, first in the break room, then in hushed legal meetings. And Slater's name? It was on everyone's lips, but nobody said it too loudly. Not anymore. Inside a windowless conference room, Ryan sat straight-backed at a long metal table, his fingers laced together, knuckles pale. Monica Reed sat beside him, a calm presence, with a notebook in her lap. Across from them was Deputy Chief Wallace Green, his face unreadable behind a thick beard and a tired stare. The recording device blinked silently in the center of the table. "Just speak clearly and from the beginning," Green said, his voice low and level. "We'll stop if you need a break." Ryan nodded. His heart pounded, but he wasn't afraid. Not anymore. After everything, he had earned this space, this platform to speak, to be believed, to not be brushed off like so many queer men before him had been. He wasn't just some stereotype. He wasn't invisible. He was Ryan Maddox, openly gay, proud, and damn tired of being treated like a threat for simply existing. He began recounting the events from the night before, every detail etched into his memory like it had been branded. The way Slater approached, the tone in his voice when he asked about Samuel, the shift in body language after hearing the word husband. Ryan's mouth went dry, recalling the moment Slater reached for his gun. Not just a threat, but a trigger pull away from catastrophe. When he finished, the silence in the room felt thick. Green leaned forward, pressing his palms together. "Mr. Maddox, I want to apologize for what you experienced in our town. Regardless of what procedure Slater thinks he followed, this department failed you. And you have my word, there will be action." Ryan didn't smile. "Thank you, but I don't want another quiet internal review. I don't want it buried. If this can happen to someone like me, someone connected, then what about the people who don't have that safety net?" Green nodded slowly. "We've already called in an outside investigator. Civil Rights Division. The State Attorney General's office has also been notified." Monica chimed in. "And I filed a preliminary misconduct report with a recommendation for full suspension pending outcome. Slater has been temporarily stripped of his badge and sidearm." Ryan exhaled. Not relief, not victory, just breath, like he'd been holding it for far too long. Later that afternoon, the story broke, nationally. Samuel had tried to keep it quiet, tried to prevent the media circus from making things worse. But by noon, major networks had picked it up. FBI director's husband held at gunpoint by local cop ran across every banner, news ticker, and feed. His name, his face, and his identity, gay man, civilian, husband, were now public knowledge. The comments flooded in. Some called him brave. Others called him a liar. Some questioned what really happened. But most saw it for what it was, a cop letting hate get in the way of judgment. A man being targeted for his queerness, and an entire town forced to confront its own reflection in the mirror. Ryan sat at the edge of the bed in the cabin's small guest room that night, his phone buzzing non-stop on the nightstand. He ignored it. His legs bounced restlessly, his shoulders hunched with the weight of it all. The weight of being visible. Samuel entered the room quietly. He crossed the space and placed a warm hand on Ryan's shoulder. "They're spinning the story already," Ryan said, not looking up. "Saying I was aggressive, saying I provoked him." Samuel nodded. We expected that. Ryan turned to him. Why does this still happen? Even now? Even with you in that position? With your name? With your title? Samuel sat beside him. Because it was never just about the titles. It's about people who see anything outside their world as a threat, and they've been trained to fear before they think. I hate that being gay still feels like holding up a target, Ryan whispered. Samuel's voice softened. You didn't put that target there, they did. You just refused to hide it. That silence settled again, but it wasn't empty this time. It was full of understanding, full of pain, full of the strength that only comes from loving openly in a world still afraid of what that means. Ryan finally looked at him. I don't regret being who I am, but I hate what it exposes you to. Samuel smiled faintly. Loving you doesn't weaken me. It reminds me what I'm fighting for. They stayed like that for a long time, leaning into each other as if anchoring against a storm that hadn't passed yet, but would. The next morning, Ryan got a call. It was Sergeant Reed. Her voice was tight, like she was holding something back. There's been development, she said. Slater's union is pushing back. They're calling for his reinstatement pending review, saying it's political retaliation. Ryan's mouth went dry. After everything? I'm not letting it slide, Reed assured him. But there's pressure from town council, from donors. This is bigger than Slater now. It's become a symbol. A symbol for who? Ryan asked. For people who don't want to admit this place has a problem. Ryan hung up the phone and stared at the floor. Something in him clicked. He'd been quiet for long enough. If they wanted a symbol, he'd be one. Not a victim, not a headline, but a voice. Because if this could happen to an openly gay man married to one of the most powerful people in the country, it meant no one was safe. And Ryan Maddox wasn't going to let that truth be ignored. The town of Brentford didn't waste time picking sides. By day 3, the local diner had pulled their rainbow "We Serve Everyone" sticker off the window. The high school principal made a vague statement about respecting law enforcement under pressure. And outside the courthouse, a group of middle-aged men in camo jackets held up cardboard signs that read, "Support our cops," and false accusations hurt real heroes. Ryan saw it all through the tinted windows of the SUV as Monica drove him through town to meet with the civil rights investigator. His jaw was tight, his stomach turned with every sign they passed. The energy had shifted. The town wasn't whispering anymore. It was roaring. They turned a corner and came upon a fresh mural painted along the brick wall of a hardware store. It showed a police badge held high like a shield, its blue outline glowing bright. Below it, in bold letters, honor, integrity, strength. Subtle, Ryan muttered. Monica didn't look over. Don't take it personally. I'd love not to, but the cop who pointed a gun at me is getting more support than I am. They're scared, Monica said flatly. Scared of what happens if they admit they raised a man like Slater, worked beside him, ate lunch with him, called him brother. You didn't divide them. He did. They parked behind the government building. Monica shut off the engine, but neither of them moved. I just wanted to pick up groceries, Ryan said quietly. I didn't ask for any of this. No one ever does, she replied. Inside, the conference room smelled like burnt coffee and copier toner. A woman in a navy pantsuit sat at the head of the table, already flipping through a folder with Ryan's name printed on the front. Her expression was cool, but not unkind. Mr. Maddox, she said. I'm Special Agent Dana Rhodes with the DOJ's Civil Rights Division. Thank you for being here. Ryan sat across from her, smoothing the edge of his sleeve. He didn't recognize his own reflection in the mirror behind her. He looked exhausted, not just from the past few days, but from everything that came before. The small slights, the silent judgments, the way people turned polite when they found out he was gay, and then even more polite when they found out who his husband was. I want to be clear, Dana said, interlacing her fingers. "This investigation isn't just about Officer Slater. It's about the entire department, their training, their culture, whether they're enabling this kind of behavior." Ryan nodded. "Good, because I don't think I was his first target." "You believe there's a pattern?" "I know there is," he said. "People in this town, they learn to stay quiet, to avoid attention, especially if they're gay, or trans, or black, or just different." Dana didn't look surprised. "We've had similar reports, none that stuck, no one brave enough or visible enough to bring the heat." Ryan exhaled. "Well, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." After the meeting, Ryan stepped outside and into a slap of cold wind. The street was quiet, but not empty. A man stood by the crosswalk, holding a coffee and staring at him. Just staring. Ryan looked back, unmoving. The man turned and walked away. It was subtle, but it was happening more and more. They didn't always yell, they didn't always post angry rants online, but they watched. They made it clear, you don't belong here. That night, the threats began. Not obvious ones, nothing loud enough for headlines, just envelopes without return addresses. No names, just words. "We see you. Your kind isn't welcome here. Go back where you came from." Samuel held one of the notes between his fingers, his face hard as stone. "Is this really the cost of truth now?" he said. Ryan sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the note in his hands. "It always was. We just ignored it until now." The FBI had offered to relocate them to a hotel outside town. Ryan refused. "If I leave," he said, "they win. They prove I am the outsider. I'm not running." Samuel didn't push, but he didn't hide his worry either. "You know what kind of people we're dealing with." Ryan looked at him. "I do, but I also know what kind of person I am." The following morning, Ryan did something bold. He showed up at Brentford's town hall during the city council meeting. He didn't sneak in through the back, he didn't sit quietly in the audience. He signed up to speak. When they called his name, he walked to the podium slowly, his back straight, his nerves humming. The room was packed. Most of the people there weren't friends. Some wore pro-police shirts. Others had Slater's name written on hats and stickers. Cameras were everywhere. Ryan adjusted the microphone. "My name is Ryan Maddox," he began. "I'm a writer, a volunteer with LGBTQ+ youth shelters, and a husband. I moved through this town 3 days ago like any visitor might, calm, respectful, hoping for nothing more than a peaceful stay. Instead, I was threatened at gunpoint. Not because I was dangerous, but because I was visible. Because I was gay. Because I had the audacity to be married to another man and drive through Brentford without hiding it." The room buzzed. A murmur moved like a ripple across a pond, but Ryan didn't stop. "The man who did this to me wore a badge. He swore an oath to protect everyone, but he looked at me and saw a threat." He paused, letting the silence build. "I'm not here to destroy your town. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because if you don't deal with what's rotting beneath the surface, someone else will bleed for it. Someone without a famous husband. Someone without national attention. Someone who won't make it out alive." He stepped back from the mic. No applause, no shouting. Just silence, which said everything. Back at the cabin, Ryan collapsed into the couch, his heart still pounding. The camera footage would go viral within the hour. He didn't care. He hadn't done it for attention. He did it because it needed to be said. Samuel sat beside him, placing a quiet hand on his knee. "You were brave today." Ryan looked at him. "I'm always brave. I just never had to be loud about it." They sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the wind blew through the trees. But inside, something powerful had begun to shift. The next morning, Brentford woke to the sound of its own reckoning. Local news anchors tried to maintain neutral tones as they read the headlines, but it was clear something had cracked. National outlets had picked up the town hall video. Ryan Maddox's words, his calm, defiant voice, were playing on repeat across every major network. On TikTok, a clip had gone viral, set to music that turned his speech into a call to action. Queer creators stitched it with messages of solidarity. Civil rights advocates reposted it, allies cried. But in Brentford, not everyone was clapping. At the local coffee shop, someone had carved the words "gay liar" into the front window before sunrise. A rainbow flag from the nearby community center was found in a ditch, soaked in oil. Online, people speculated about Ryan's intentions. They accused him of exploiting his husband's title, of making it up, of performing victimhood for attention. Ryan didn't see most of the comments. He had turned his phone off 2 nights ago. Instead, he sat in the sunroom of the cabin, curled into the corner of the couch with a mug of tea going cold in his hand. He stared out at the woods, but his mind wasn't in the trees. It was back on that road, back under flashing lights and drawn weapons, back in the moment when one man's hate had nearly ended everything. Samuel came in and stood quietly behind him. Ryan didn't look up. "They want me to come back and testify in the hearing. Face later. Say it all again." Samuel didn't move. "I don't want to," Ryan said. "I know I should. I'm so tired." "You don't owe anyone your pain," Samuel replied gently. "Not again. Not like that. But what if I don't go and he walks? What if he gets his badge back? What if this town lets him smile in a parade and pretend it never happened? Then it's their shame to carry." Ryan finally turned to him, eyes rimmed red. "I'm scared, Sam." Samuel crouched in front of him. "Of what?" "That I'll become what they say I am. Just another angry gay man. Another troublemaker." Samuel's voice was soft but unflinching. "You're not angry. You're hurt. And you're still here. That's not trouble. That's courage." Ryan let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "I don't know if I have anything left to give." "You do," Samuel said. "And I'll be right there, next to you, every second." Later that day, Sergeant Monica Reed arrived at the cabin. Her usual steely demeanor was cracked at the edges. She looked tired, worn down by the internal politics and pressure that hadn't made the headlines. "Slater's lawyer is spinning a news story," she told them. "They're saying it wasn't about your identity at all, that he had reports of a suspicious vehicle, that it was a tense moment and he made a mistake." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "A mistake with his hand on the trigger?" "They're saying he feared for his safety." "Because I'm gay?" Ryan said. Monica looked at him. "Because you're not like him, and they won't admit that part out loud." She handed him a folder. Inside were transcripts, statements, security footage from the gas station down the street showing Ryan's car driving normally minutes before the stop. Monica lowered her voice. "Ryan, I need you to testify. If you back out now, the department will fold under the pressure. I've already lost 2 officers to resignation this week. I can't protect what's right if no one's willing to speak it out loud." Ryan stared at the folder. His hands trembled slightly, but this time from anger. "They tried to erase me, and now they want to pretend it never happened." He looked up at her. "Then we don't let them." Monica gave a small nod. "We've got your back." 2 days later, the courtroom buzzed with the kind of tension that made people lean forward in their seats, not sure whether to brace or bear witness. Ryan sat at the witness table in a navy button-up and dark slacks, nothing flashy. His wedding ring caught the light when he rested his hands on the wood. Samuel sat behind him, 1 row back, his presence solid and unwavering. Across the room, Slater sat, stiffly, in a suit that didn't quite fit. His lawyer whispered something in his ear, and he responded with a slight shake of his head. When Ryan was called to testify, the entire room seemed to exhale. He stood, walked forward, and took the oath with his right hand raised. Then he sat, met the prosecutor's gaze, and told his truth again, this time with cameras rolling and the town watching from every corner of their homes, coffee shops, and back rooms. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He spoke. Clearly, calmly, like someone who had been through a storm and lived to name every sound. I didn't ask to be profiled. I didn't provoke anyone. I simply existed, openly, as a gay man, and that was enough for him to see me as dangerous. The defense tried to rattle him, asked if he'd exaggerated, asked if he had a history of emotional reactivity, asked if he'd ever had negative experiences with law enforcement before. Ryan looked them in the eye. I've had negative experiences, but this was the first time I thought I might not make it out alive. The room was quiet. Even the judge leaned forward, listening. When he stepped down, he walked back to his seat, and Samuel reached out, just a pinky finger brushing his. That was all it took. That night they sat on the porch under the stars, wrapped in one blanket in silence, not because they had nothing to say, but because they knew what mattered had already been said. Ryan took a deep breath. I think I'm finally okay with people seeing all of me, the good, the scared, the angry, the gay, all of it. Samuel smiled. That's the man I married. And for the first time since that awful night, Ryan let himself believe it. He wasn't just surviving this. He was changing it. The verdict came on a crisp Friday morning. Ryan and Samuel sat shoulder to shoulder on the courtroom bench, their fingers intertwined beneath the table, out of sight but not out of strength. The air inside was still, as if the walls themselves were waiting to exhale. Slater sat across the aisle, eyes locked on the judge, expression unreadable. The judge's voice was even, deliberate, but every word struck like a bell in Ryan's chest. After reviewing the testimony, evidence, and conduct of Officer Brian Slater, this court finds that excessive force was used without justification. Furthermore, we find strong grounds supporting a violation of civil rights, motivated by discriminatory bias. Ryan closed his eyes, not to block it out, but to feel it fully. The judge continued. Effective immediately, Officer Slater's certification is revoked. He is ineligible for rehire within any state law enforcement agency. This case will be forwarded to the Department of Justice for formal civil rights proceedings. The room was silent. No applause, no dramatic gasps, just the hum of resolution hanging in the air. Slater didn't speak. He didn't look at Ryan. He simply stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out like a man who had finally been told who he really was. Ryan stayed seated until his legs stopped shaking. When he finally stood, Samuel was already rising beside him, and as they turned toward the door, the crowd parted. Not with judgment, not with hostility, just quiet acknowledgement. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions, their microphones like hungry mouths, but Ryan didn't stop to answer. He didn't need to. Not today. Instead, he stepped down the courthouse steps and into the sunlight, Samuel beside him. Back at the cabin, they packed in silence. There was nothing urgent, no rush, but they both felt the chapter was closing. Ryan paused at the fireplace and looked around once more. I didn't think we'd make it out of here okay, he said softly. Samuel zipped the last suitcase. You didn't just make it out, you changed something. Ryan turned to him. It still feels like a scar. Samuel crossed the room and kissed his forehead gently. Scars mean you healed. Later that week they returned home to D.C., not to the quiet anonymity of government corridors or the buzz of media noise, but to something else entirely. The local LGBTQ+ center had set up a welcome home event. Not big, not flashy, just people, friends, neighbors, strangers who had followed Ryan's story and felt a little more seen because of it. Ryan didn't prepare a speech. He didn't want one. But when they handed him the mic, he took it. I was afraid to speak up, he said, because I thought people like me weren't supposed to be angry, that we had to be soft, polite, palatable. But that fear, that silence, that's what keeps people like Officer Slater in power. He looked around the room. So many different faces, so many different stories. I'm a gay man, and I will never hide that again, not to keep the peace, not to make anyone more comfortable, because my existence isn't political, it's human, it's real, and it deserves to be safe. The crowd rose to their feet, but Ryan didn't smile for the cameras, he smiled for himself. In the weeks that followed, the DOJ opened its own investigation into Brentford PD. Sergeant Monica Reed was appointed interim chief and immediately began policy overhauls, sensitivity training, civilian oversight, anonymous reporting structures. Ryan declined a formal position on the board but agreed to advise from afar, quietly. He didn't want the spotlight. He just wanted the system to get better. He also received hundreds of letters from queer teens, from tired parents, from other survivors of police discrimination, people who didn't have power, didn't have connections, but had lived through something similar and finally felt like someone had spoken for them. One letter stood out. A handwritten note from a young boy in Kentucky. 14. I'm 14. I'm gay. I thought it meant I had to stay small. But you were loud. You were scared and brave at the same time. I think I can do that too. Ryan kept that one. Framed it. Spring came early that year. On a Saturday afternoon, Ryan and Samuel sat on their townhouse balcony, a pair of coffees between them, and the hum of the city rolling in gentle waves. The air smelled like blooming cherry blossoms and sun-warmed stone. You know, Samuel said, watching a dog chase a pigeon below, I used to think visibility was a burden. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Used to. Samuel nodded. Used to. Now I think it's armor. Ryan smiled. Not everyone gets to wear it. Then we wear it for them. They fell into an easy silence. For the first time in a long time, Ryan didn't feel like a cautionary tale, or a headline, or a symbol. He felt like a man, a husband, a survivor. He wasn't healed all the way, not yet, but healing had begun, and this time it wasn't happening in the dark. It was happening in the open, in the light, where everyone could see him, and where finally he wanted to be.